Madame de Pompadour was the famous mistress of King Louis XV of France. She was his political advisor, best friend, and chief lover. On the outside, their relationship was happy and healthy, but modern historians now know that the couple hid a dark secret behind bedroom doors. Just 5 years into their relationship, they stopped making love. But the reason for their abstinence was so shocking that it's impossible to forget. Jean Antoinette Poisson, who would later be known as Madame de Pompadour, was born on December 29th of 1721. As a young girl, a fortune teller predicted that she would reign over the heart of a king, a prophecy that would set her on a remarkable path. Despite her humble beginnings, Jean's destiny was intertwined with the highest echelons of French society. A significant scandal took place in Jean's childhood when her father, François Poisson, was discovered to be deeply in debt. In 1725, to avoid the severe consequences of his financial failures, he went into exile, only able to return 8 years later. At that time, failure to pay debts could result in the death penalty, making his exile a lesser evil. Madame de Pompadour's legacy extends beyond her political influence. According to the legend himself, King Louis XV was so enamored with her that he modeled the shape of the French champagne glass, the coupe, on her breast. This enduring symbol of their intimacy reflects the scandalous nature of their relationship. From a young age, Jean was nicknamed Rionette, meaning Little Queen. This name was more than a playful jest, it foreshadowed her future role at the French court. As Madame de Pompadour, she would hold immense power, effectively reigning without a crown. Madame de Pompadour mesmerized King Louis XV with her stunning beauty. Her blonde hair, blue eyes, alabaster skin, and rosy cheeks made her an irresistible figure. However, her lasting influence was due to more than just her looks. Pompadour was not only beautiful, but also highly intelligent. She received an excellent education at an Ursuline convent, impressing even the philosopher Voltaire with her extensive reading. However, her academic pursuits were cut short when a severe bout of whooping cough forced her to return home, where her mother's ambitious plans for her began to unfold. After her father's exile, Jean found a protector in the tax collector Lenormand de Tourneham. He became her legal guardian and provided her with expensive tutors to continue her education. There were rumors that his motivations were not entirely altruistic. Lenormand de Tourneham's devotion to Jean led to speculation that he was her biological dad. Whether true or not, this rumor explained his generous support and care for her. The question of Jean's paternity was further complicated by the involvement of her godfather, Jean Paris, who might have also been her biological father. Jean's mother's promiscuity left her parentage shrouded in mystery. At 19, Jean married Charles, a wealthy and handsome financier chosen by her guardian. Their marriage faced significant challenges. Charles was deeply infatuated with Jean, who initially reciprocated his feelings. She claimed she would never leave him except for one man, the king. Charles likely dismissed this as fantasy, but he soon learned not to underestimate her ambitions. Jean's mother played a crucial role in her destiny. After Jean returned from the convent, her mother became a mix of a pimp and a manager, training her daughter to be the king's ideal mistress. She believed Jean was a morsel fit for a king. The marriage between Charles and Jean was controversial. Lenormand de Tourneham, Jean's guardian, made Charles his sole heir, creating tension within the family. Jean's wit and intelligence shone in the French salons, where she mingled with influential figures like Voltaire. Despite her low-born roots, she became a prominent salon hostess. Pompadour first tried to get King Louis XV's attention with a show-stopping gesture. In 1744, the king went on a hunting expedition at Pompadour's estate. She rode in the king's path several times, changing outfits each time to make sure he saw her. No one becomes the king's chief mistress overnight. In 1744, Madame de Châteauroux was already favored by Louis and tried to keep him away from Pompadour, but the rivalry ended brutally. In December 1744, Madame de Châteauroux fell to her knees and convulsed from intense stomach pain. She died, claiming she had been poisoned. By March 1745, Pompadour became the king's official mistress and moved into the Palace of Versailles, directly above the king's chambers. King Louis XV's children were not pleased and called her Mommy Whore. Pompadour was thrilled to be the king's mistress. However, her husband Charles was deeply upset. He was shocked when he learned she planned to leave him. Charles's father even approved of Pompadour's social climbing and gave his blessing for her to pursue the king. Charles remained furious at Pompadour's betrayal and refused a prestigious position as French ambassador to Turkey, interpreting the offer as a way to remove him from France so Louis and Pompadour could enjoy their affair freely. When Charles refused to give up his wife, King Louis arranged a legal separation. Charles also enjoyed several affairs and eventually settled down with a famous dancer. This is where Charles drops out of history and Pompadour's story accelerates. From 1755 to 1881, the British Army's 56th Regiment of Foot, known as the West Essex, earned the nickname Pompadours because their purple uniforms matched Madame de Pompadour's favorite color and undergarments. When Madame de Pompadour moved into Versailles, she lived directly above King Louis XV. He had a secret staircase built between their rooms, which soon became public knowledge. Jealous courtiers mockingly suggested the king loved her only for her staircase. Despite potential tension with Queen Marie, Pompadour maintained a cordial relationship, paying off Marie's gambling debts and gifting her a golden snuff box. Marie quipped, "If there must be a mistress, better her than any other." At her peak, Pompadour served as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Marie, wielding significant power. She enjoyed luxury, including chocolate, champagne, and truffle soup, and provided comfort to the melancholic King Louis XV. They would retreat to chalets, pretending to live simply while using costly items. Pompadour was titled Marquise of Pompadour by Louis, who also honored her brother. Despite this, rivals saw her as manipulative, using the king's weaknesses for power. In 1750, public pressure forced Louis to reform, pushing Pompadour to rebrand as the friend of the king. She commissioned sculptures of herself to counteract negative sentiment and secured more lavish accommodations even when pushed to leave Versailles. Though Pompadour and Louis were deeply connected, they could not have a child. All of her pregnancies ended in miscarriage. Her influence included assisting with the Treaty of Versailles, leading to the 7 Years' War, which brought criticism but also reforms that made France wealthy. Pompadour's famous quote, "After us, the flood," implied indifference to the future. She began dressing as a peasant to challenge critics, a trend later adopted by Marie Antoinette. She decorated her boudoir with paintings of herself as a goddess and accepted Louis's other affairs, valuing his heart over his physical dalliances. In 1750, the public began to pressure King Louis XV to clean up his act, get rid of his mistresses, and live as a good Christian ruler. For Pompadour, this was as good as a death sentence. If the people wanted her gone, she'd be out on the streets. Luckily, Pompadour wasn't just pretty, she was smart too. She immediately rebranded, pitching herself as the friend of the king with an elaborate gesture. She commissioned 2 wildly expensive sculptures of herself. It's safe to say the people weren't thrilled. Even when the public demanded Pompadour get the heck out of Versailles, she managed to swing a deal in her favor. She agreed to live in another set of apartments to appease the court. She just didn't mention one little detail. Pompadour's new digs were even fancier and more expensive than her old place. Honestly, I should be mad, but I'm just impressed. Amid all Madame de Pompadour's missteps, she and the king really did share a deep connection. But there was one thing they could never share: a child. Pompadour was plagued by ill health, and even though she became pregnant multiple times, all of her pregnancies ended in the same tragic way. She miscarried her and the king's child every single time. Such was Pompadour's influence in Louis XV's court that foreign diplomats often asked for her help with political negotiations. The esteemed diplomat Wenzel Anton Graf Kaunitz requested Pompadour's assistance with the seminal 1756 Treaty of Versailles. Pompadour knew this was a crucial moment for her budding political prowess, but she had no idea her actions would have utterly disastrous consequences. The Treaty of Versailles made waves in 18th century Europe, and one of its biggest developments was turning the former enemies of France and Austria into allies. This alliance was the reason France entered the brutal 7 Years' War. This massive global conflict began just months after the treaty was signed, and unfortunately for Pompadour, it could not have gone worse. After 7 years of violence, the war ended, but France had no reason to celebrate. The country had lost brutally, giving up their claim to territory in what is now the United States. Pompadour's enemies immediately pounced on the opportunity to malign her. They didn't blame the king for France's embarrassing defeat, but his close advisor, Madame de Pompadour. But that's not the full story. The irony is that while Pompadour's responsibility for France's defeat was indirect at best, it is a historical fact that Pompadour supported a number of important ministers such as Bertin and Machaut. These ministers would implement reforms to France's infrastructure, trade, and taxes, which would eventually lead to France becoming the richest nation in the world. Even so, there is a dark detail about Pompadour's involvement in the war, and it involves a now famous quotation. Pompadour said, "After us, the flood," to comfort her love, King Louis, after France's terrible defeat at the Battle of Rossbach in 1757. But what did she mean? Pompadour either meant that whatever happens after Louis doesn't matter, or far more darkly, that everything will collapse after his reign. Pompadour began a controversial trend. Almost daring people to bring up her bourgeois background, she'd dress up in a milkmaid's attire and pretend to be a peasant. The trend was so influential that even Marie Antoinette kept the fad going. She commissioned golden milk churns for her poor person cosplay. You know, because nothing makes you think of French peasantry more than solid gold. As a patron of the arts, it made sense for Madame de Pompadour to cover the walls of her boudoir with expensive custom paintings. What raised more eyebrows was the paintings' shared content. Many of them featured glamorous depictions of Pompadour, and not only that, many showed her dressed up as an actual goddess. She clearly didn't have issues with self-confidence. Because of Pompadour's disastrous involvement with the 7 Years' War, she became the most hated woman in France. Angry courtiers even campaigned to make the king kick her out. But such was Pompadour's power over the ruler. The whole country could demand that he cut his mistress loose, and he still wouldn't budge. Pompadour stayed at the palace. Louis was not a one-woman man. During his affair with Pompadour, he sated his physical desires on the side with casual sojourns in his Parc aux Cerfs or Stag Park, a building specifically for the king's affairs. Rumors swirled that Pompadour was the mastermind behind the king's debauched palace, gleefully setting up her lover with a harem of women. In reality, Pompadour just accepted the king's side pieces. Later on, she revealed the chilling reason for her acquiescence. Pompadour told one of her friends that Louis' side dalliances didn't bother her because "it is his heart I want. All these little girls with no education will not take it from me. I would not be so calm if I saw some pretty woman of the court or the capital trying to conquer it." But as we'll see, there were far more reasons for her to be so relaxed about Louis' side pieces. Madame de Pompadour's shameless quest to get to the top of the French court didn't always make her the most popular person in the room, but when she got on the wrong side of the Comte de Maurepas, she learned to regret it. He wrote an utterly vicious poem about Pompadour where he made fun of her for her recent miscarriage. And as though that's not bad enough, some historians believe the poem had an even crueler meaning. In Maurepas' infamous poem, he refers to Pompadour's white flowers. It sounds innocent, but nothing could be further from the truth. Everyone at the court knew Maurepas' scandalous double meaning. He alleged that Pompadour's nether regions produce a thick, odorous discharge. But it gets even worse. Apparently, this wasn't just a cruel jibe. It might have been true. Scholars believe that Pompadour may have had leukorrhea. Pompadour was deeply offended by Maurepas' cruel poem, and she used her significant power to make her enemy regret his words. She quickly got her lover King Louis XV to exile her enemy Maurepas. Pompadour 1. Maurepas 0. Pompadour pops up in all sorts of places. Not only did her breast form the shape of the French champagne glass, there's also a rumor that she influenced a famous engagement ring style. King Louis XV may have commissioned the Marquise cut diamond as a homage to his beloved mistress. Apparently, its shape is based on Pompadour's mouth. Pompadour made her mark on French history, not just as a mistress and politician, but a tastemaker. She was a patron of the arts whose commissions supported painters, writers, and porcelain artisans. Do you ever wonder how Paris got a reputation for being so fancied and cultured? Thank Madame de Pompadour. Denis Diderot, the French writer, critic, and philosopher, was not fond of Madame de Pompadour. Following her death, he criticized her, stating, "What remains of this woman who cost us so much in men and money, left us without honor and energy, and who overthrew the whole political system of Europe?" Interestingly, during her lifetime, Diderot flattered Pompadour to secure her patronage for his encyclopedia. His true feelings surfaced only after her passing. Madame de Pompadour faced relentless insults at the French court due to her humble beginnings. High-born courtiers often mocked her lowly background, referring to these jibes as poissonnades, a play on her last name Poisson, which means fish in French. In 1762, a Catholic merchant named Jean Collas was wrongfully accused of killing his son and suffered a brutal death at the hands of the French police. Upon learning of this injustice from her friend Voltaire, Madame de Pompadour intervened and persuaded the king to overturn Collas' sentence. Madame de Pompadour influenced Louis XV to pass a bill that suppressed the Jesuits, a rising Christian group. This decision was contentious, causing division within both France and the royal family. Despite opposition from Louis's son, daughters, and wife, Pompadour's influence led to significant restrictions on the Jesuits' rights. Pompadour was involved in the arts, learning to engrave gems and staging over 100 plays at Versailles. These productions often featured Pompadour herself in flirtatious roles opposite Louis XV, much to the delight and envy of those at court. Madame de Pompadour was a trendsetter in fashion and the Rococo art style. Her influence was so significant that a shade of pink was named Pompadour Pink in her honor. Madame de Pompadour's health began to decline in 1764, leading to a diagnosis of tuberculosis. Despite Louis XV's care, she succumbed to her illness at Versailles at the age of 42. Following Pompadour's death, tributes poured in from across France. Louis XV described their bond as a 20-year friendship, while Voltaire expressed his gratitude for her support. Even the weather seemed to mourn, with heavy rain falling on the day of her funeral. Despite his deep grief, court protocol prevented Louis XV from attending Pompadour's funeral due to her middle-class origins. Madame de Pompadour had convinced Louis XV to construct the Petit Trianon at Versailles, intended as their private retreat. After her death, this mini chateau became the residence of her successor, Madame du Barry. Madame de Pompadour's legacy includes the hairstyle named after her. The pompadour, characterized by hair styled high on the forehead and sides, has been worn by notable figures such as Elvis Presley, Marlon Brando, and David Beckham. Pompadour remains a figure of interest in popular culture, including an appearance in the Doctor Who episode The Girl in the Fireplace, where she was portrayed by Sophia Myles. Despite their outwardly happy relationship, Madame de Pompadour and Louis XV ceased being sexual partners around 1750. 5 years into their relationship, they stopped engaging in intimate activities. Pompadour's shift in her relationship with Louis XV was publicly attributed to her poor health, which included multiple miscarriages and frequent illnesses. Privately, however, Pompadour was not particularly interested in sexual activities. Madame de Pompadour's lack of sexual desire led her to adopt a peculiar diet of celery, truffle, and vanilla in an attempt to increase her libido. Unsurprisingly, this odd combination did not have the desired effect. One of Madame de Pompadour's portraits depicts her embroidering, a seemingly innocent activity. In reality, she used these moments to conduct political negotiations with world leaders. Despite being Louis XV's great love, Madame de Pompadour engaged in an act that ultimately contributed to his family's downfall. She edited the first French encyclopedia, which criticized the law and the church, sowing seeds of discontent that would later culminate in the French Revolution.